Good morning to everyone. This is Aman Borch on behalf of LGBTI plus Gozo. I welcome you to this online discussion, The Relevance of Pride in 2020. This discussion is held in light of the more symbolic pride that we are having in the Maltese Islands that is being celebrated in the month of September. And for this conversation, for this discussion, we saw the importance of discussing two different teams that are very important for the current situation locally in Malta. Firstly, we will be having a conversation about sexual health in Malta, and then we will be talking in our second panel about racism and transphobia. And the reason why we saw the importance to talk about racism and transphobia because this year's Pride is in fact talking about it is not Pride if it's racist and transphobic. So for the first discussion, I would like to welcome Donia Gamaudi and Matthew Bartolo, two individuals who are firstly allies of LGBTI plus Gozo, but also to the topic that we're going to discuss today. I would say experts and professionals in sexual health, and the individuals that I look up to also in learning and understanding the current situation, the current challenges that we are facing in Malta. But when we say sexual health, firstly, good morning, Donia, and good morning, Matthew.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
So when we talk about sexual health, Donia, I want to start this conversation by explaining more on what do we understand with sexual health.
So sexual health is quite a wide term. Unfortunately, it's often a neglected area, but just like we take care of our physical health, our mental health and emotional health, the WHO, the World Health Organization, stresses about the importance of taking care of our sexual health if we would like a holistic good health. It's a state of physical, mental and social well-being in relation to sexuality and sexual relationships. It requires a positive and a respectful approach to sexuality, as well as the possibility of having safe and pleasurable sexual experiences free of coercion, discrimination, and violence.
It's a very, that is the definition of the World Health Organization. When we mentioned it, and in fact you mentioned it at the beginning, that we are saying that sexual health does not live alone. We don't have sexual health and then we have, physical health or emotional health. These are things that are that live and make the person who he is as an individual. Donia, do you think that in Malta we understand in reality how important sexual health is?
I think we did come a long way in the last few years or decade, but yes, there is very much a room for improvement. It's often an area which is neglected or not given the necessary importance. But we all know that sex is one of the important things in our life, and it is important for fulfillment. And with a poor sexual life comes a poor physical health. So sometimes some problems related to sexual health, like erectile dysfunction, are a marker of poor physical health and increased risk of heart disease, for example. So that needs to be kept in mind. Plus also, if there is poor sexual life, then there is often mental and emotional consequences. And that's probably where also Matthew sees the repercussions of poor sex life having repercussions or the effect. So if someone is mentally passing through a difficult stage, depression or anxiety or psychosis, then we see that the sexual life suffers the consequences. So it's both the causality as well as an end result. of mental health. So in reality, the physical, mental health, the emotional health, and the sexual health cannot really be divided or seen as separate entities, but they are all need to be present for holistic health.
Matthew, even in your experience and through your team of willingness, how much do you see this as being a reality? With your patient, and so also the perspective of sex. I mean, when we're talking about sexual health, we're talking about sex in reality, be it present or not present. But how much is it this a reality in Malta?
It's very interesting because when I talk to colleagues of mine who are not within the team, who are working in family therapy, in other aspects of therapy, they would say that it's not as important, it's not part of one's mental health. However, when you train professionals to ask about sexual health, even in our assessment, even if the patient, the client is presenting with a totally different problem, like depression, like body image, something which is totally different from the actual sex life, you will see that it is very much related. And the professionals who ask about sexual health will see a pattern, but the professionals who choose not to ask about sexual health will obviously not see a pattern. But if you look at research all around, not just within my team, but also internationally, you will see that sexual health is very much dependent on and part of mental health and physical health and social health as well. So when
Matthew,
people are stressed, even financially, chances are it will affect their sexual desire as well.
Matthew, you mentioned very much mental health. Do you think that, and I say, do you think, I mean, through your experience, not only like a person, but maybe through the work that you both do, do we believe that the LGBT community has a particular mental issue in regards to sexual health? I mean, we're mentioning how health is not just one bit, it's a holistic thing. Do you think that, if we had to dissect this, what does research tell us when it comes to mental challenges that LGBT community can have also in regards to sexual health?
Yes, if for example we're talking about transsexuality, research does show us that there is a problem, sometimes financial issues, when it comes to people who have transitioned or are transitioning because of problems finding employment.
Yeah.
So financial well-being will definitely affect sexual desire and sexuality. Part of sexuality is relationships and is being in love, and being in love, I think one of the important things or celebrations of love is being able to tell the people around you that you are in a relationship and you complain about the relationship and you talk about the relationship. It is part of who we are, it is part of our identity. So when a person cannot do that because of fear of judgment or of hate comments or hatred, then of course it's going to affect our identity and how we see ourselves. And that will, as a consequence, then affect our sexual life as well, our sexuality. Donia quoted the definition for sexual health. And in my opinion, from where I come from, the most important parts, which are very much excluded in our sexual health locally, are the positive and respectful and the pleasurable. For people to be able to enjoy sex, they need to be able to express their sexuality wherever they are. And by that, I don't mean PDAs and snogging each other when we're at the restaurant, but it is about accepting who you are and feeling accepted within your community. And when we talk about different races and different sexual orientations and different genders, I think it's also important to mention people with disability and the elderly as well, who are also struggling when it comes to sexual health because of the implications and the ideas that society puts on the diverse population. It's like we have this idea that sex only belongs to the heterosexual white couple who are very fit and sexy. And if you move away from that idea, then it's almost like you don't deserve to be sexual.
But where do we, where this idea comes from somewhere? There is this, is it the media that portrays, the famous sex gods, the sex symbols, the celebrities, there is this idea is coming from somewhere. And then also the challenges that one faces to accept themselves just as they are.
I, I think the answer would be that we have been given this idea of beauty for a very long time from the traditional media. And nowadays it's being reinforced through Instagram and through um, movies and series that we watch. You know, if we think of um, sex scenes in movies, you won't think of fat people having sex, you won't think of people with disability having sex, people of color having sex. Even if you go on a porn site, you will see that such people would be labeled as niche porn. So, what porn sites feed you are white people having sex. And usually, most of the time, it's heterosexual people. Then, if you want to look for gay sex, you have to look for it in a different category. If you want to look for overweight people having sex, you need to look for it on a different category. So even that in itself is telling us what is normal and what is not normal, what is almost fetishistic sex in a different category.
I would like to include Donny on this conversation also about your experience in the Geo Clinic and how, of course, it is firstly just to mention it is a safe and there's confidentiality. But from your experience as a professional, um, is when someone comes to the Geo Clinic, do we think that there is shame? Do they feel shameful, or is it something which is more common? And also, what challenges do you think are faced by individuals that want to access the Geo Clinic? I think there's two questions in there. Firstly, the challenges that people face to access the Geo Clinic, and secondly, when they do access the Geo Clinic, is it you know sh- is there taboo around it? What do you think?
So we do get two categories of patients. We get the patients who come very often to the Can you hear me?
Yes, Donia.
Okay. So we get the category of patients who come to our clinic very often, every 3 months. And for them, just like going to your family doctor to have your blood pressure checked, you're coming to the clinic to have your sexual health checked. And there is no, obviously, these are the category of people that are very comfortable coming to our clinic, are used to our process. And are the ones that find coming to the Geo Clinic a very positive experience with no barriers. Okay. And then we do have a category of patients that still find the experience of coming to the Geo Clinic of a bit of an ordeal or stigmatizing. I think it is mainly related to the size of our island, that a lot of people know each other, so they don't want to be seen in the clinic. I mean, in my personal experience, for example, if I compare sexual health attendees, for example, in Malta compared to the sexual health attendees in the UK, I can see quite a marked difference. For example, in the UK, we used to call the patients with their first name, which can be a fake name, okay? But we used to call them with their first name, and I think that creates a bit of a more personalized experience, and that the person, if it was me as a patient, I would feel better if I'm called by a name or by a number. But we did receive feedback, and obviously as a service we always listen to feedback given to us by our patients, our clients, and we changed the system, and actually it's called by a number, so no one in the waiting room would know obviously that that person is named, say, Matthew, for example, but they're called by a number. if you had to ask me, I think creating these things, although they are important for confidentiality, and obviously all the test results, they will never be processed under the name or surname, but they will be processed under a code. It's we are almost creating the stigma bit ourselves, because if we want to break the stigma and the taboo around sexual health, then we need to normalize the process. It's okay to be seen at the GEO clinic. One can be there for many reasons. It does not mean that you've had sex with someone else, or you have HIV, or you have, there are many reasons why someone comes to a GEO clinic. It can vary from getting advice to a woman having advice on contraception, for example. Yes, so obviously the patient sometimes they do feel, we do feel the stigma is a bit palpable. Obviously, there are many campaigns, educational campaigns going out there. Yes, we can do more to break the taboo and the stigma around this process. But yeah, definitely.
I want to ask, in fact, about that, Donia. Do you believe that schools are doing enough when it comes to discussing about safety? I mean, safe sex, etc., but also removing the labels of what is normal. What options, do you think that schools are doing enough? And I know, Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, and I do apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, that you did work on some sort of educational curriculum, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So we offer a program which is called Dating 101, where we go into schools, especially in Gozo, and we target parents, teachers, and students. And we find that when you do it that way, parents are seeing themselves as partners in sex education, as opposed to um, feeling threatened by sex education. I think it's very important to bring the parents on board when doing such an education campaign.
But this is interesting, because you're mentioning parents as being partners, and this is basically having an open conversation. I mean,
Yes.
correct me again if I'm wrong, but having an open conversation about the sex, about sex life, about relationships, about having partners, about falling in love, because this is all related to this. And this is so dating 101 goes directly to this. What was the receiving end? Was it welcomed? Did you have any negative impact?
I remember the first time I was teaching sex education in a school. I remember 5 parents, mothers, coming to the office of the head and protesting against the sex education program. And I remember the head back then, this was about 12, 13 years ago, telling me, Matthew, we have a problem. We have 5 parents who are protesting and they want to see the lesson plans of your teaching. And I remember telling the head, it's not a problem at all. I think it's an opportunity. It's amazing that these people came to have this conversation. And I went down to the office and I had a very long conversation with these parents. They were suggesting their own ways of doing it, like, for example, them being present when I am teaching sex education to their kids. And I was explaining that, and I was telling them what we're going to be talking about, and I was explaining to them and asking them how would they feel if their children are in the same room. And together we came to an understanding that it's not the right place for them to be there. We want the kids to feel free to ask questions that they would be embarrassed asking the parents. But at the same time, train the parents to answer questions that are related to sexuality when the kids feel that they can ask the questions. So these 5 parents then were actually helping us in the sex education campaigns in the following years that I spent in this school. So I think it's very important that when parents feel threatened, we know, because in the LGBT community, we know what it feels like when people are threatened by trans people, people are threatened by Black people. And why are they threatened? Because of lack of education. And when it comes to sexual health in Malta, I think the most basic cause of this problem is the lack of education. The idea that the GEO clinic is only there for people who are infected. The idea that if we go into a class to talk about LGBT, we're going to change people into gay people, or they're going to change their gender or their sexual orientation. And instead of being militant and fighting back these people, these ideas, I think what we need to do is the opposite. We need to be able to educate these people. Just yesterday or few days ago, we know that a very big fighter for gender equality and gender equality died, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And what did she used to say? I'm going to look for the quote now because I forgot what the quote was.
In the meantime, Matthew, while you look for the quote, I mean, we're mentioning, and Donia mentioned it also, first the education, and also normalizing testing. And a friend of ours also mentioned how it is important to normalize testing and to make sure that our education is.
But are we making it sexy? Are we making it cool? So when we look at sexual health in Malta, are we working with marketeers? Are we working with people? Are we using the language that the people use? Or are we insisting on talking in technical words, technical jargon, which off-puts people? I think that what willingness has done to sex therapy in Malta is a very big example of this. When I came to Malta, a lot of people were telling me, you will never have a full-time job with sex therapy because no one will come to sex therapy. Nowadays, we are 40 people in this team working directly and indirectly to sex therapy and family. So if you manage to educate the people and bring them onto your side and help them understand, see what LGBTQI Gozo did for diversity in Gozo. Okay, you just had Rosian Kutayar and the Minister of Gozo coming over and supporting your initiative. When you started back in about 4 years ago, I was a guest speaker, I remember. The feeling was different. How will people react to us? Let's try and find a hub where people won't know that they're coming because they are LGBT. Nowadays, we are celebrating LGBT even in Gozo. So I think when it comes to education and marketing our ideas, I think then we can help people come onto our side. Just to finish off with this, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg says, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So instead of teachers saying parents don't attend classes, try and see how to make it more interesting for the parents to attend your classes about sex education. So it's very important to educate people in the language that they understand so they can understand your cause as well.
Matthew, very well said. I also appreciate, firstly, both your support, both Donia and Matthew's support on this regard. Time is expressing. I mean, we recognize that when we were planning this, 30 minutes is not going to be enough, but we also want to be aware that we are online and, social media fatigue nowadays is a thing. I'm sure, Matthew, we can have a conversation, another conversation about social media fatigue and the effects of COVID-19. And in relation to COVID-19, and I mean, it's automatic. Sexual health in Malta right now, there are challenges. We know that the GU Clinic first, the staff is amazing, and Donia and your staff work very hard, but the resources are what they are. Donia, what challenges exist at the moment in regards to the GU Clinic and in regards to COVID-19?
So yes, as we said, the COVID-19 pandemic has obviously put a lot of pressure on health resources and the Ministry for Health, and obviously it is a priority at the moment, which we all understand. Our main challenge has been the limitations by the lab. Obviously, in our day-to-day service, we rely very heavily on the lab because obviously everyone who comes to our clinic will need to be tested. And the testing for sexually transmitted infections is currently worked at the molecular diagnostic section of the lab, which is the same section of the lab which is working round the clock processing the COVID samples. So we understand that this has put a lot of pressure on our lab colleagues, and therefore we have been given a limit of the number of samples that can be sent to the lab. So at the moment, we cannot send more than 12 samples to the lab. So this has obviously affected the testing process at the GU clinic. So the number of people that you can see during our day has been reduced again because of this lab process. There are talks, and we're currently working with Ministry of Health to see how we can increase our testing, but obviously the talks are still underway.
And of course, what Don is mentioning also the fact that these challenges are not only in Malta and Gozo, as LGBTI plus Gozo, we have been lobbying quite actively about sexual health and the need for a GU service in Gozo. And of course, 12 samples a day, it's a very limited number, it's a very challenging number, and it's a number that is not worthy of the sexual health in Malta. And I repeat the call that we have been mentioning about the need to have a sexual health strategy on the island. I mean, it was written in 2011, and even back then, sexual health was perceived, and sex in general was perceived in a different way. I did have a lot of other questions, and I would like also to give the opportunity to Matthew. To also, I would like us to take the point that you mentioned about the sexual health being sexy.
Sexy.
There's the current conversation also in our Facebook live chat about the word sexy and what it means.
Yes, and at that point in time, I was talking about marketing, and what I mean is make it approachable, make it okay to do it, okay to go for testing. Make it also uncool not to talk about testing within the relationship, whatever kind of relationship it is. But let's make STI and HIV testing as part of the courtship. Let's help people understand that it makes your sex life better if you're actually talking about it. The same way that willingness did with talking about sex, even when there is a problem. Okay? And nowadays, I can see that it is much more acceptable for people to talk about sex when there is a problem within the couple. So let's all push together, all stakeholders push together to make it okay, make it uncool if you don't talk about STI testing within the first 3 dates that you have with someone new, be it a hookup or be it a serious, stable, whatever you want to call it, relationship. So that's what I meant by sexy.
But it's good, and I really appreciate both you, Donia, both Matthew, and the individuals who are commenting, friends of ours, activists of ours, who we have conversations on a day-to-day basis with. We all have this topic as a very passionate about this topic, all of us, and the reason why, as LGBTI plus Gozo, we felt that we needed to have this conversation about sexual health is to slowly, and I'm sure that with all our collective efforts, diminish this taboo, to make it sexy, yes, to ensure that there are conversations about sexual health. I mean, plenty of cases. I mean, I had a lot of questions to ask regarding casual sex. I had also questions about, listen, what happens when I'm having a one-night stand and I do not tell my sexual status to the other partner, and what happens in that case? Things that are very, very evident. And I'm sure that hopefully in the future, in a physical way, in a physical space, we can have this conversation even more. And I would like to add Carly in the conversation. Carly, who's a trans activist, someone who has been in the forefront. And Carly, firstly, good morning, and thank you for joining. Good morning. And we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation the challenges that trans individuals face when it comes to sexual health, the financial challenges, the challenges that are faced on a day-to-day basis also to access maybe the gender aware clinic, well-being clinic, etc., etc. Your experience also when talking with other individuals, what do you see as a bigger picture when we're talking about this?
Um, so again, what I can draw from is personal experience. 2, 3 weeks ago, a transgender woman reached out to me in terms of if I go to the gender clinic or if I see a private doctor in relation to our own sexual health, our own sexual checkups. I'm going to try and be as technical as possible, but if I say the wrong word, I'm sorry in advance. After SRS, and again, personal experience, you cannot compare this woman's genitalia to a trans woman's genitalia. It's different. The care for a cis woman is very different to a trans woman surgery. So unfortunately, in my limited experience, that lacks a lot. After my own surgery, I had a complication. I went to Mater Dei. I'm honestly so grateful to Mater Dei because I'm here speaking to you today, thanks to the staff at Mater Dei. But when I initially got there, I had three departments between, I was being juggled between urology, plastic surgery, and gynecology. So I had about 8 people in the emergency room with me trying to figure out what it is that they can do for me. So again, ultimately they saved my life. So I have nothing but gratitude. But did it really have to take that long? Did I really have to see that many people? Did so many people have to come and inspect my genitals? Sort of thing. I mean, it's it's a struggle. Like I initially said, 2, 3 weeks ago, a friend reached out. I see a gynecologist privately because I am blessed enough that I can do that. And in fact, I referred her, and I think he managed actually to see her at Mother Day because she said, kind of, I really can't afford to kind of pay the fee for a private doctor. And that was it. I mean, I know, unfortunately, at this point in time, with the pandemic, we're limited with everything. But what it comes down to is, unfortunately, yes, I think we lack. I think we're still far behind, and I think there's the logic. I think behind it is always comes down to there aren't enough cases. There isn't enough need for people to specialize in maybe this particular aspect.
Yeah, Carly, firstly, thank you for being candid. I mean, let us be real here. There's no reason, I mean, to go around the bush and just just not talk about what was happening. And this is a real life experience that is being experienced currently in Malta 2020. It is not something that we see on the news. It's not something that maybe we get sensationalized about it, but not really understand this is happening. In reality. I would like to thank both Donia and Matthew for being part of this panel. You are more than welcome to say, but I know that the schedule is quite packed. Matthew, thank you so much. And I know that you wanted to say a remark. I can see your hand up.
Yes, yes. I know I'm going to drop this and leave, but I find it very frustrating that on one hand we hear that there are too many patients and we don't have enough staff. But then on the other hand, we hear there aren't enough cases to specialize in this. So I think we really need to have a good look at ourselves and see how we can support people better when it comes to our sexual health, I think.
No. And with,
On my end, I just want to say thank you for the invite. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to working with LGBTI plus GoZo in the future. And if any of you or any of our viewers would like to ask or me any questions, you're welcome to pass them my details. And as a Geo Clinic, we can be contacted on geoclinic@gov.mt. We want to make contact via email or as by phone on 2545-7494. We try to do
so Donia is struggling a bit with the Wi-Fi.
It's a bit.
But thank you, Donia. Thank you, Matthew. Regarding details, I can officially say that as of now, we have officially launched the Queer Friendly Professionals. So what is the Queer Friendly Professionals? Basically on our website, lgbtigozone.com, I do invite everyone to go on it, and on the resources section, both Donia, Matthew, and other individuals are included in the Queer Friendly Professionals, which offer services in Gozo, and we ensure that both sexual health, being legal support, and being spiritual support, etc., etc., there is a directory for individuals that you can access there. So Donia, also thanks to our newsletter that is reaching over 500 people every month, our article is also, the monthly articles are also on the website. Thank you, Donia. And with that being said, I would like to also invite Dali and Chiara to the conversation. Two other young activists who are joining us today in this conversation, two activists that I have the pleasure to have worked with Chiara before. But Dali, I mean, we got in touch in the last 2 weeks, and I did my research, and Dali, I'm quite impressed also with the work you are doing, especially with the migrant community in Malta. And firstly, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
And Dali, I would like to start to continue this conversation. Also, shifting now rather than sexual health. I know it's an important topic, but I'm not saying, and again we can continue talking about it. But also, this year's Pride theme is "It is not Pride if it's racist and transphobic." What does that mean in reality when we say that? What does it mean?
For me, to be honest, now like we are seeing what our community went through of like discrimination and stigma and this life of all the stereotypes that we have and generalization about our community. And now within our community, we try to discriminate a minority within this community. So we try to do the same thing, the same means, and we use like the same idea to discriminate, to be racist, to exclude a part of our community. So this is what I see it like happening. A lot of people, they don't feel comfortable being in some events, like within gay events. So if we cannot be like in pride if we are like, if there is racist around us, if us being racist toward others and doing the same thing, basically.
Dali, when are the moments that racism is highlighted? We can talk about this because I am still learning as someone who maybe is not exposed to this, but not exposed to this doesn't necessarily mean that I cannot be a voice against it. And I think this is a very strong message that you are mentioning. But when are certain cases that highlight racism in Malta?
To be honest, taking like the Black community, and like I'm working with LGBT migrants, asylum seekers here and everything, they take them as all of them sex workers. So they don't like, even on apps and like dating apps and things, they don't see them as like having a personal relation or something like this. So everyone will just ask about how much you want from the beginning. Also, like a lot of this is like, it's in everything. You find like no black, no like these kind of comments. Also, when it comes to and gay events, sometimes there is a lot of racism within that kind of like atmosphere, being like accepting black people just to work in that club, to clean, and that's it, but they cannot like celebrate or go to drink, to have a drink. And it happens to people that I met, and they shared their story with like what is happening to them in these places. So basically in Malta, it's like a big image, a small image within a big one, like suffering from a lot of things to day life, and then you come in the community and you see the same things. Like recently, 2 months, 3 months ago, there is like a profile on Grindr that's saying like no foreigner, Malta is for Maltese. So seeing this, it's like emphasizing that there is this kind of racism within our community.
And Carly, when we talk about this, I mean racism, and then also our community seems to be, it's very ironic that we have a community that we want to celebrate diversity. We celebrate diversity, and I think all of us here, at least I know for a fact that what we do is all about diversity in perspective of who we are and what our identities are. But when it comes to the larger community, when it comes to the let's say society in general, we see transphobia also within the LGBT sphere, within our own conversations that we have, and without without even thinking that it's not only LGBT, but it's LGBTI. There's different facets in our identities, and it's not only about sexual orientation, but it's also about our gender identity and gender identity. From your experience and also as an activist, is this transphobia within the community real? And what can we do to mitigate it and to make sure that people are educated?
Definitely still real. Obviously, if we're going to look internationally, we can see, especially in America, how killings and violence and crimes against transgender individuals, particularly transgender women, is obviously what I recall, because that's what obviously catches my eye. So if we're going to look globally, definitely. If we're going to look more locally, we have the laws, we have the best laws that protect us, but then unfortunately, and going back to what Matthew said earlier, the education lacks. Again, I can draw from personal experience, and as in what I hope no one gets offended by what I'm saying, but recently I was told trans Malta, sorry, you're basically the best trans woman in Malta. So at that point, I felt, I guess it's a compliment. However, what are you basing that on? My, looks, my intellect, my successful integration into a society, my possibility. What are the basis for that comment? So, okay, granted. So, does everyone need to look like me? Does everyone need to sound like me? I mean, what put me in that category, and why is it just me and not others? So, I think especially within the community, there needs to be more education. I mean, it could start from schools. It could start from simply just doing the research. But I think we really like the education, and even in terms of terminology used, dead naming, gender. I mean, it's present. It's present, and it's not nice.
And you mentioned this, thank you first of all, Carly, because what you mentioned a new phrase, cis society. Someone who is cis, I didn't even think about this. Like, no, I didn't even, and this is not, it's because again, it's education. It's being aware and being present in these conversations and learning about realities. And this is very powerful. Firstly, opening a conversation where everyone, no matter what our identity is present. And in light of that, because we're talking about education, and the one thing which I believe can be a key to education are youth, and how youth converse with each other, how you look into researching with each other, etc., etc. And Chiara is the president of the National Youth Council of Portland. I would like to feed in Chiara and the conversations that youths are having when it comes to racism, when it comes to transphobia, and I'm saying this because it hurts personally, and we saw the need to invite someone from a youth perspective, that we see youths our age, quite frankly, passing racist comments, passing transphobic comments, sometimes as a joke, without being aware that they are part of the system, without being aware that this is the problem. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
So firstly, thank you for inviting me to this debate. It's been very interesting so far. I think the discussions that there are going on can be quite diverse. So you have the side of the activists that are obviously very pro, very open, but there is still a lack of education, and still a lack of understanding, even within certain people who are actually looking for it, because there either is a lack of information or they don't know where to look for that information. Um, I think one of the biggest problems, so to say, with the discussions, when you see negative discussions where there is discrimination, is that very often it happens within the community itself. So if, as an onlooker, if let's say I'm a cis straight person looking into a group of gay individuals having a discussion, if I'm hearing them discriminate people from their own community, how can I, as a cis straight person, accept them if not only people within the community are doing it? Very often, as a community, we tend to be lumped together, and people forget to look at the intersectionality of both our sexualities, adding then of course our race, many of their aspects that to remove the notion that being gay is our sole identity. And I think I cannot press enough. It was already mentioned previously, the need for more understanding and more education. Yes, we as youth can be a source of that information, and it does need to come from us that we are careful how we speak. When we are joking, certain words should not be used, or at least if I know that I'm comfortable with certain derogatory terms relating to the LGBT community, I shouldn't assume that other people are going to automatically be comfortable with those terms and call them in a general group. So we need to be very careful of how we have these discussions, so that there's always safe space to learn more and see how we can adapt to be more accepting of the various facets of our community.
And what you mentioned, Chiara, also the importance of intersectionality within our society. And the one thing that I've experienced in Gozo was the fact that when LGBTI plus Gozo was launched, and the focus was, I mean, when you see me, I mean, you see a cis white gay man, and in this reality, I started being more aware of the fact that, listen, I am privileged, you know, I am one of the privileged people, and I need to count the fact that I am, and I need to say that, and then we need to be aware of this reality, and then when it comes back to Gozo, and I'm not separating Gozo and Malta, but of course our activism as LGBTI Gozo is Gozo. The fact that it's only about gay. There's limited, but now also thanks to them, we're having more awareness about trans and the challenges and the trans realities also. Unfortunately, we were doing a non-binary project in September, but it had to be postponed for restrictions. But I'm sure we'll get to do it. But also, Dali, and this is something, a conversation that as LGBTI plus Gozo would like to have. Also, for example, the migrant and asylum community in Gozo, how visible it is. And I say that is because sometimes I feel that certain policies, that certain safeguards are there to protect those who are in a minority, but then they are invincible. They don't know how to access these safeguards. Those who need them most don't even know that they exist. And then these are things that we're talking about this quite a while. And some of these safeguards are in the workplace. At work, you know, we have laws that cannot discriminate at work based on gender, based on race, based on sexuality. But Dali, at work, you already mentioned that someone who's of color tends to have the, you know, cleaning the club, but not necessarily perceived as being able to own the club. What's your experience with this?
Seeing like recently a gay club posted like a vacancy in the club, and he's putting EU citizens only. So it's against the law, but the law is something, and what is happening on the ground is another thing. A lot of people tend to categorize people, so you cannot do these kind of things even if you have the ability to do it. And this is a problem for a lot of people, you know. Integration for me like start with language and these kind of things, and there is communities that is really vulnerable, like the LGBT community. We don't forget that we are not speaking about even like a gay black man within the Maltese society, but he's living in his own community and he's still in danger here. Like fleeing his country and coming here, he will be living with a community that refuse him even in Malta, and he will be living in fear. And mostly like uh, I met a guy that he's been here for 8 years and he never come out to anyone, and he was like his first coming out was to his social worker. So no one knows about him here in Malta, and he couldn't meet any people. He couldn't socialize because he's afraid of his community. So people like these kind of things is like making things worse, you know. And for gay people, they are more vulnerable, and there is no any idea of how to make this integration work for these people and others to be able to open for them a work opportunity, and that they can be able to do their stuff, and being in university and then go out with a degree and do something. But like for example, to have a stipend to work and like study and at least have something, some money to spend, you have to be here 5 years. So being asylum seeker or a refugee coming here alone without a family, you cannot study and like having a stipend to live with. So you have to wait for 5 years at least to start studying. So these are like type of integration that really like put people within the work atmosphere. They are very limited, and they cannot be they cannot upgrade their degrees. They cannot do anything because the system is not a system to welcome people and to integrate people.
I mean, when we say this is very, it's very interesting to hear, because when we say that Malta is equal and we are the first in the rainbow map, for example, when it comes to LGBT laws, I mean, all right, granted. I mean, if we look into the asylum part of that map, we are only like 1/3 into it, so there's still a long way to go. But I mean, how there is a lack of conversation about this. People are not aware of this. I mean, the media out there, and I am very critical about this in the media. We put migrants into a limelight, and sometimes it's not only us, the activists, because as activists, and that is not to bombard our horn or anything, but with the resources that we have, as limited as they are, we are doing more than we should be doing. But sometimes it needs, as you said, Dari, it needs to be the system that needs to change, because these are things that the system needs to change. If someone needs to wait 5 years to get a stipend, this is something the system needs to change. And I can rest assured that we will keep on fighting. And now that I am aware of this, Dalia, we will keep on having this conversation. As LGBT plus goes, we will support this, because we need to unite together to have this conversation. So and to put it in the limelight. And I know that you and the Malta Gay Rights Movement are doing very good job. Sometimes it's job that's not marketed on the media. It's job one-to-one, very silent. I believe it's the most effective that there is. So thank you for that. And Carl, the same question goes to you also, the discrimination for trans individuals on the workplace. I know that we have a law that has passed in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I'm forgetting the dates now. But is it, again, from what Dali mentioned, you know, the law is one thing, but the reality is another thing.
Definitely, I agree, person. In relation to work, recently, I think it's been the last 3, 4 years, where during my first interview, I actually tell the interviewer that I'm transgender, because in the past, where I have stressed and worried, and kind of I'll get the job and then they might find out and then that might backfire. This way, I'm just being 100% honest. So if you're gonna hire me, you know exactly what you're getting. If you're not gonna hire me, then fine. I mean, it's so and literally I think he said it perfectly. You know, the law is one thing, but in reality it's another thing. For you to prove discrimination on the basis of gender or sexual orientation, it's so impossible. And I've only worked in private companies so far, so there's, even in terms of policies, they lack in terms of maybe companies that don't employ as many people. HR, which is basically what I'm studying in my profession, is pretty much either non-existent, or the owner or the CEO thinks that they can take on the HR cap, and HR is seen as a way to, you know, find loopholes around the law rather than actually instill what the law is stating. So I'm fortunate enough to kind of have the strength and ability to state these things during my interviews. I obviously understand that not everyone feels as comfortable and not everyone should have to do that sort of thing. You know, you're in a job interview, so that situation is already stressful enough, or you're in a work environment, which could be either your first job, be it you're, you know, trying to do your best so that you don't have to end up without a job, especially during these times. So I think what it's down to is again education and awareness. Recently, about a month ago, I watched the documentary Disclosure, and it's fascinating. And even to me, seeing how growing up as a child, the perception of someone who is transgender is kind of implemented. And the thing that stuck with me the most is the Ace Ventura film, where in the end the villain was someone who is transgender, and the room full of policemen are throwing up when they find out. Sort of, you know, as a child, it probably just went right over my head, but ultimately it's setting the pace for kind of us as adults. So I think as a community, you know, we need to kind of, when there is this misconception or this, you know, the wrongfulness in terms of whatever we're doing, I think we need to actually say something about it. Fortunately, now I have the hate crime unit, which I would like to thank. I myself have recently also filed a report, so at least it's kind of a step in the right direction. But I think there's a lot more that as a community we can do.
Mentioning us as a community, firstly, thank you for all the audience that are sending their questions on our Facebook. I'm trying to manage looking into the questions and also engaging in this conversation. But one of the questions I would like to ask is firstly to you, Carly, and also to you, Dali, is how can the queer community can be more inclusive of both trans and migrants? What can we do as the queer community? I mean, sometimes we expect everyone else to do something, but what can we do to be more um, trans inclusive and migrant inclusive?
I think for me, it's just react. I think, and I myself am guilty of it as well. If I'm having a bad day and someone is either passing wrong information or passing a racist joke or a transphobic joke, and you're just like, I don't have the time and I don't have the energy to stay arguing or educating, or but I think as a community especially, we really need to fight through that. And even we don't need to fight or argue, but we need to kind of at least show that we are not happy with that, or that that information is wrong. I mean, ultimately it's some form of bullying, which, you know, as far as I know, the best way to kind of deal with that is to actually react. Doesn't need to be violent, doesn't need to be huge, but there needs to be some form of a reaction as a community.
Very much. And Dali, your thoughts on this?
For me, it's like what we are doing is very important. Like advocacy and everything. It's one part of what our community is doing as like activists and thing. But also, like I'm totally agreeing with Carly. Like what she said, it's like commenting and stop these kind of things immediately, kind of. You know, don't let it be something that it's normal. What we are seeing now, like for example what happened in the migrant community, what we are seeing in the media, this is what happens. It's something that it's like becoming normalized, like all the hate speech and everything, it's something normal to see, and it's accepted to say whatever you want and to threat people, and it's accepted. And like this is like our community have to stand for each other, kind of, you know, even if as you said, like a man, like you have the privilege and everything, but you still feel the need to stand for others, and this is the same thing that we need to do.
Very much, very much. And Chiara, the last comment also on your side is what can you do to make sure that we are inclusive irrespective of our identities?
I think for one is to actually educate yourself. So that very often when there's discrimination is because of a lack of understanding. So if there is something that is so quote unquote scaring you, it's because you are unaware of it, you're uneducated. You do need to make the efforts to educate yourself. We as a council, we are creating various toolkits for our member organizations and for youth in general. And one of the two on best practices in general, for example, how to be more sustainable, etc. And one of the ones that we are currently working on is actually on how to be more inclusive for different sexuality, race, and we will be publishing it shortly on our website. So we'll be having a long list of tips and tricks there. But something I think that we need to keep in mind as well, particularly on this topic, is that the lack of visibility of certain label, so to say, makes us lucky in the sense that I, as a bisexual woman, okay, in my case, I do tend to look slightly stereotypical lesbian. However, most gay or lesbian women do not particularly look gay. When then it comes to racism and those who aren't as possible trans, it's something much more visible and it's constantly on our faces, on their faces rather. And it is something that many TikToks came out during the Black Lives Matter movement, that we need to remember that me as a gay person, I don't have a label here saying I'm gay, but if you're Black, your skin is there constantly reminding people of who you are. And it is something that we need to keep in mind, that it is a privilege to us, that we shouldn't underestimate it. And it it should act as an incentive to be able to help our fellow members of the community or people who are different than us, because while I can hide sometimes who I am, if I start to be scared, other people are not able to.
Very, very common. And I think when it comes to privilege and when it comes to labels and when it comes to understanding that certain individuals has to face their daily challenges, I think that's a conversation and another discussion and another event which we can have and which we can continue exploring these conversations, because these are the conversations, very important conversations to facilitate also understanding and to educating the general public. Unfortunately, due to time, and as I also mentioned at the beginning of the event, we as an organization, as LGBTI Plus Group, we are very much aware of social media fatigue. So we try to limit as much as possible, but still give room to explore. But I think, honestly, we just scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this. And hopefully in the near future, we can have both online and physical activities like this, where we all come together and we can have these conversations. I would like to thank Carly, Chiara, and Dali for your time, for your commitment, and for always being there, both for the LGBTI plus Gozo and also for the general community. Deeply from my heart, I thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Long weekend, and it's a long weekend. You are more than welcome to stay. It's a long weekend that for one person in particular in this poll is being celebrated celebrated, or rather being worked from in Brussels. We saw also the need to invite MEP Josiane Cutaillard, the youngest and the first Gossetin MEP, who actually reached out to us to participate in this event, which is great, which confirms more commitment from Josiane, who we have been talking about the need for sexual health in Gozo, as well as the current situation when it comes to transphobia, LGBT phobia in general in European countries, and also the work that you are doing as an MEP as part of the working group, the LGBTI working group that you do. The floor is yours. I really would like to learn more about the work that you're doing and your thoughts about this.
Thank you, Aman. And I also thank the previous speakers. They were two very interesting panels. I was also listening to whilst doing other things and preparing also for my intervention. Hello from the European Parliament. It's the first time I came here on a Saturday, but I prefer to be present here so that I'll ensure that I have a very good internet connection. So first of all, when it comes to this particular event, and I ask why Pride, I like the title you've chosen, and it's something very important and not an uncommon question. Why do we still have Pride in 2020 and don't we have all the laws in place? It's true, we've made great advancements, even as a country, ranking high upon the index, and it's something I'm very proud of, and I continuously state to my peers in the European Parliament. But then we have also to say that legislation is not the end of the road. It is not a destination in and of itself, but it's a very significant first step. At the social level, are we there yet? I don't think so, and I'm sure you all agree with me, because I'm sure that a lot of people here have personally or have friends who have experienced, or even family, hateful comments, and this is something we still need to address, continue addressing. How many comments, for example, have you seen recently on the social media that can easily be described as hate speech, homophobia, transphobia? And I'm sure you do follow, as I do, and especially LGBTI Gozo, which works directly in this field. I'm sure a lot of people also reach out to this organization. What does this tell us? That we still have a long uphill road to go together, and we have to continue this fight together. When I speak of this field, I don't speak about tolerance. Nobody should be made to ask to be tolerated. We tolerate a burden or a discomfort, but people have a right to express themselves and their sexuality and their gender in the way they feel best and they feel more comfortable in. What I speak of is respect, and I think we base our relationships, close or remote, our discussion and our treatment to others in general on respect and decency. In this way, we will all live in a much better, easier, and fulfilled life. We also celebrate Pride to remember the long uphill struggle we have gone through to be in this situation in this day and age in 2020, but also to remember that not everyone, not everywhere is in the same situation. There are LGBTI communities not too far away from us, unfortunately, that are still being persecuted and that are still suffering from a lot of discrimination. And therefore, we have to work together. And as European Parliament, we have taken the plight of these people very seriously. We made it a point to flag what is happening across the world, and especially in Europe, by means of resolutions and plenary sittings. We were strong in our stance against discrimination in Hungary, and we are still monitoring the situation, the very serious situation in Poland. We intervened also against Romania's proposed law against gender identity education. In these countries, unfortunately, we are not only seeing discriminatory practices at the social level, but regressive legislation. We have governments of European member states legislating against what they call LGBT ideology. We will continue to be vigilant and stop these governments from steamrolling on people's human rights. And Ursula von der Leyen, during this week's speech, was very also clear about this topic, and she also took upon this plight and emphasized the importance to fight together. We're lucky to have a Maltese commissioner, Helena Dalli, who's working on the equality strategy, and I'm sure that the great work she's done locally will now also be extended and reflected in the EU. Our role in the European Parliament's LGBTI intergroup is precisely to monitor what's going on in Europe and beyond, to monitor the EU's work in this field, and also to reach out to civil society and empower it as much as we could, so that we'll continue working together. things I tried to do over the past year and I'll continue doing. And yes, that's why I also reach out to our civil society. And when it comes to the relationship with LGBTI goals, so it also goes back during the campaign. When we focus on the importance of the sexual health services in our islands and also in the island of Gozo, which is smaller and is not on the mainland. Legislation is not enough to eliminate discrimination, as I've already said, and therefore it's important to see that the necessary medical services are there to everyone. And here, my collaboration with LGBTI Gozo goes back for many months. Now we've spoken about the importance of having a geoclinic in Gozo during the campaign and after the campaign recently in a meeting we had. And therefore, it's important that we continue fighting this cause. Gozitans and visitors of our island are not sufficiently protected and we lack what we deem basic services. Make no mistake that the demand we have made in the past together is still there, and I'll continue to support you to the full in achieving it. It's a fact that rural and peripheral areas are more isolated in the sense that LGBTI people in these areas have fewer opportunities to be openly LGBTI and also to have access to the services even when it comes to medical services. And these challenges are several. They include also difficulties accessing not only the services, but ensuring confidentiality. And we know as Gozitans how important confidentiality is. Malta and Gozo are small in general, but Gozo is smaller, and therefore confidentiality is even much more essential to ensure that people feel comfortable to come forward and seek services. And yes, people in more peripheral areas experience the compounding effects of other forms of discrimination. When we speak of lack of specialized services also when it comes to the rural and more peripheral areas, we also have to keep in mind that this situation has been accentuated during COVID. We've seen, and also in the previous panel, the first panel you were speaking about the limited services during COVID, and it was a heartache also to me to see also the sexual health services being limited. And this brings me to a very other important point, which is access to technology. For many young people who are LGBTI in rural areas, access to the internet can provide an important forum for developing and maintaining connections and for accessing peer support, information and assistance. And therefore, it's essential to see to it that we have high-tech infrastructure and skills. We have older LGBTI people who may not have the necessary skills or the necessary infrastructure to access these services. And therefore, we have to work towards this to ensure universal access of technology to see to it that, yes, all people, even those of an older age, have access and therefore eliminate the risk to isolation. This aspect is an aspect very close at heart. I believe that I work a lot in the technological field, and I believe that we should focus on ensuring universal access of technology to see to it that social services are provided to all and also to those who are suffering discrimination or who are suffering lack of services. And therefore, I will also work in this field to see to it that technology will be universally accessible. As a conclusion, because I know I don't want to take too much time, and yes, time flies a lot, it's essential also that together we broaden this debate and I invite you towards this. Let's take Pride Week as an opportunity to first of all celebrate the great steps we have made, but also to promise ourselves that we will not stop here and we will keep on striving towards equality for everyone. But let's not stop there only. Let us ensure that the debate about discrimination is inviting and inclusive as much as possible. I will also be a shoulder in all of this, and where I can be of assistance, please feel free also to get in touch. I think LGBTI Gozo for this very important activity in the times of COVID. We have to continue being effective, even if it means going online. I thank you for all your work, and I look forward to collaborating more in the future. Take care.
Thank you, Josiane. I think the essence also of this conversation that we had this morning is not only about how professionals in the first discussion, not only how activists in the second discussion, and also policymakers now with Josiane, is how we can all and how we should all join together and towards a collective effort make a difference when it comes to sexual health, when it comes to discrimination, when it comes to access to technology. Very three important points. I know that Josiane is working very hard on this. I mean, we talk on a recurring basis about the work that is happening, and we thank you as Educator Gozo for your support. We thank you for your work that you're doing, because it is not easy to be in the forefront sometimes of policy change, especially in the dynamic reality that is Europe, in the dynamic reality that is the EU. And these are things that we need to be aware of. But then again, it needs to be a cross collaboration. It needs to be a two-side conversation where together with policymakers, together with activists, together with professionals, we will join under one table and have an honest conversation, as transparent as a conversation we can have, to actualize change. Josiane, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
To you as well, and the good work to you in Brussels. Thank you to Mohammed. Thank you to Carly, and thank you to also Donia, Matthew, and Chiara for joining this conversation. The queer-friendly professionals are now online on our website, lgbtgozo.com. You can access this discussion on Facebook Live on our Facebook page if you want to take notes of it, if you want to re-experience the discussion, and if you want to see some pointers that were discussed, it would be on Facebook as well, so you can access it anytime you want. And I do urge you to continue supporting not only LGBTI plus Gozo, but all other LGBT organizations and organizations that work for equality in Malta and Gozo. I wish you a happy day, good weekend, and good long weekend to you all. Thank you so much, and until next time.